Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 14th of December. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, which you can find from the National Weather Service 24 hours a day at weather.gov/Alaska. If you don't have the number for the Alaska Weather Information Line, write this down, 1-800-472-0391. It's a free call anywhere from Alaska, and with the numbers that you'll get on the prompt as you listen for a moment, you can dial in your forecast and use that number faster the next time and check on local weather conditions and forecasts for your area anytime, day or night. As always, if you can't find what you're looking for, whether it's on our website, our phone system, or you don't like what you see on the show, we'd be happy to listen and hear your suggestions and comments about what we're talking about here on Alaska Weather. And I'm certainly happy to reach back to you there and talk about how we can make things better. Love to do it. Let me know. david.snyder@noaa.gov anytime. Here's a look at what's going on across southeast tonight. We have a fairly large Bering Sea storm, or actually North Pacific storm, that's moved into the Gulf of Alaska, and it is intensifying to about 953 millibars or so later tonight and tomorrow morning. As it starts moving eastward, it's really going to ramp up the winds across southeastern Alaska and the northern Gulf Coast all the way out toward Kodiak Island. Our primary concern right now is going to be in southeast. As we head into tomorrow, high wind warnings are already issued for tomorrow afternoon. We're going to start down south. A high wind warning for the Craig and Klawock area. I'm expecting those winds to come in from the southeast, probably starting to pick up around noon tomorrow and lasting at least until around 9 o'clock tomorrow night. They'll blow in from the southeast about 30 to 40 miles per hour, and we expect to see gusts around the 60-mile-an-hour range. So a lot of wind coming in from the southeast here, but at the same time, we're also going to start pulling in wind a little bit more from the north and the east over the Juneau region and down through Douglas Island. That'll come in from the northeast about 30 to 40 miles per hour, and gusts there could also reach upwards of 60 miles per hour. We'll start to see those winds starting to pick up there probably around 3 o'clock or so. That could last until 3 a.m. Sunday morning. So high wind warnings here in red for mainly Saturday afternoon, starting at noon in the south and around 3 o'clock around the Juneau and Douglas Island area, and lasting into the evening hours down south and into the overnight hours for areas around the capital city. Now, the orange area you see around Haines and Skagway is for snow. A winter storm watch has been posted for your area, and that would primarily be as we head into Saturday evening and into Sunday night. It looks like even down at sea level, we may see as much as 10 to 17 inches of snow. And of course, that would include the highway going up. We expect to see a pretty decent opportunity for snow with this weather front moving through, cold air in place, and a lot of moisture wrapping around it. So we've got wind, we've got snow, not to mention the aviation concerns that we're going to have in the region with the front lingering very close to the coastline and a lot of air moving over it. Turbulence is going to be a huge factor. Visibility and ceilings, of course, will be coming down. And if you're going out to sea, you need to pay extra attention to the forecast here because things are going to get pretty gnarly here as we get into the next 24 to 36 hours. Snotty may even be a better term for it, just right nasty. So just you might want to stick around and watch the forecast for just a minute. Here we go. Here's a look at the Friday satellite picture, and you can see this low pressure system building in. Look at all the convection we see here, clouds bubbling up across the north and the eastern sector of this. There has been thunder and lightning with this, and it is moving toward the north and east. We also have a pretty expansive area of low pressure that's been stretching into the south central and eastern interior regions. That has been creating fairly persistent rounds of snow. Most of it's pretty light, but it's persistent, and it keeps dropping about an inch or so a day across many parts of south central. Many locations across the region have already picked up about, I'd say, 6 to 8 inches of snow just this week alone because of that persistence. Up north, we continue to see that northern extent, keeping low clouds and some snow around the region. Air quality could be a concern again around the Fairbanks area, so make sure you check on that before you do any birding. And out west, you can see another wave of low pressure there working its way across the central and western chain. This hasn't been terribly expansive, but the main core of low pressure is still backed by the Kamchatka Peninsula, but all the way down to the central chain, we see that next wave trying to build in more clouds and maybe a little bit of light precipitation. The other thing we're seeing up around the Chukchi coast is enough cold air working its way southward to gradually freeze up more of that open water. And as of tonight, it looks like most of that part is frozen up. It doesn't look like it's terribly thick ice at this point, but most of that open water may be closing off as we speak if it's not already done so. Around St. Lawrence Island, more ice is forming there. Little Diomede, more ice is forming around your area, and it's all because of this cold flow dropping southward and the winds lighting up, just diminishing just enough there over that already primed cold water to produce ice in a pretty rapid order. So again, things are changing out there across the north and the western coast. Here's a look at the weather map. Trough of low pressure from yesterday is moving out of southeast. Here comes the next low in the Gulf down to 952. That's moving northeast. Low pressure and its associated fronts right over Kodiak Island, south central Prince William Sound, and some light snow falling across the interior with areas of low clouds and some flurries across the north slope. Certainly cold there. And across the lower and middle Yukon Valley, in the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys, as well as areas around Shishmaref, seeing some light snow there. Out across the west, weak trough of low pressure system moving eastward there at 999 millibars as we head into tonight. And the low in the Gulf's gradually creeping eastward. Already you can see the pressure lines packing in, telling us there's going to be a lot of wind out over the sea. Now as we get into southeast tomorrow, the winds should come up sharply, but those high winds probably wait until the afternoon or so before they really get going for Craig and Klawock, and then later on for the Juneau and Douglas Island areas for those high wind warnings. Across south central and southwest, it does look like more snow is moving through the region tonight. We could see as much as 3 to 5 inches of snow around the Anchorage region. As a frontal boundary lingers in the area, it will be that focusing mechanism for more and continuously light precipitation for many parts. As we get into Saturday, that should let up just a little bit. But for southeast, look at the winds packing in here. You can see those isobars just crammed in together, meaning there's going to be a lot of air moving over the same old region for at least several hours, maybe as much as 6 to 12 hours. There will also be areas of shower and thunderstorm activity, so mariners, aviators, and just grandma and grandpa, probably a good time to make sure that all the stuff near the back door is probably pulled up a little bit closer to the house or the garage if you can. Out across parts of the Chukchi Sea, again, we've got our light northerly flow. Snow showers forming in the region. There's some of those as far south as Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, Nikolsky, and out west, a new low coming up out of the North Pacific at 965 will creep eastward as the current low pressure system kind of expands and loses a little bit of its intensity. It will still have a front across the southern Gulf Coast as well as the southeastern coast. And with that, we expect more rain, occasional shower and thunderstorm activity across the eastern Gulf, and another round of snow for south central and the Parks Highway system too. So if you're anywhere around Talkeetna, Broad Pass region and southward, there's a decent chance you're going to see more snow as we head through the weekend. And there will also be an area of low pressure and some light snow across the upper Yukon and the Yukon Flats. So Fort Yukon probably looking at some light snow as well as hit and miss areas along the west coast to St. Paul and St. George. Let's take a quick check of your temperatures for tonight. It looks like southeast, lower to mid 20s for most locations. Ketchikan and Nanette, maybe the upper 20s there. Teens and 20s for south central. Kodiak 34, 18 below in Fort Yukon, 25 below in Arctic Village, and 15 to 30 below for the North Slope. It's going to be a cold night for you all. 10 below in Nome, anywhere from about 5 above to 20 below for many locations across the Yukon Valley, and in the 20s for the Alaska Peninsula, 22 in St. Paul. High temps there, 25 tomorrow, 1 in Fairbanks, upper 20s in Anchorage, and 30s and 40s for southeast, with the North Slope looking at temps from 10 below to 20 below.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And as we look at your flying weather for your Saturday and Sunday, notice IFR conditions are expected all the way around through southern Cook Inlet, the Barren Islands, the northern end of Kodiak Island, up toward Raspberry Island, and into Seward and the northern end of Prince William Sound. The further east you go in the Sound, expect more marginal conditions throughout the morning. And southeast should start out with VFR throughout the day, but there is going to be considerable turbulence throughout the region. More on that in just a minute. Out across the Bering Strait, look for IFR conditions there, marginal through most of the Bering Sea itself, and then you'll see a wide swath of MVFR stretching all the way from, it looks like the Alaska Peninsula, just grazing parts of Bristol Bay proper, and then through Lake Iliamna all the way up toward the Arctic coast and a large part of the coastal plain. As we get into Saturday afternoon, not a whole lot of changes up north. MVFR continues through the Bering Strait. You'll notice IFR improving there around St. Lawrence Island out toward Wales and Tin City. IFR spreads in from the next wave of weather moving out of the Gulf and into southern southeast, with MVFR also working northward. Remember, again, there is going to be a lot of turbulence around the northern and eastern Gulf Coast. Out across the west, IFR starting to sneak in across the North Pacific. You'll see most of that turn into MVFR as we get into Saturday morning. Marginal conditions all the way up the Chukchi Coast through Kotzebue Sound, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, and then kind of pulling away from Bristol Bay as you move further south. It looks like Dutch Harbor and Unalaska will also be marginal in the morning on Sunday. VFR conditions through Cook Inlet with IFR around the McKinley, Denali region up toward Healy, and then as you get up toward Fairbanks, that's a little bit more marginal as we go through Sunday morning. Watch out for convection across the central and eastern Gulf, maybe close to some of the outer coast communities, and marginal conditions through all of the inside passage. And IFR expected around the Alaska Range all the way into Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, Prince William Sound, and really most of southeast for Sunday afternoon. And once again, convection will be an issue throughout the day. The Chilkoot and White Pass region probably a little bit more marginal by the afternoon, and widespread marginal conditions continue for the Bering, with most of the north and the west coast, including Norton Sound and Kotzebue Sound, opening up a little bit in the afternoon. Here's your pass conditions for Saturday. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass we expect to be A-OK. VFR conditions and smooth sailing there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will likely start out at IFR and then leaning over to marginal conditions as we go. Expect similar conditions in Rainy Pass for your Saturday. Windy Pass we expect marginal conditions most of the day. Isabel Pass should lean all the way over to VFR, but after a hard start at IFR in the morning. Mentasta Pass probably marginal through most of the day. Tanita Pass marginal, and then heading toward VFR, so improving conditions throughout the day there. And as you look at Portage Pass, IFR is expected to start the day, but also looking for some improvement as we go throughout the afternoon. Chilkoot and White Pass for Saturday look pretty good. Marginal conditions expected again on Sunday. The surface freezing line is hugging the outer coast of southeast all the way around to Seward, just over Shelikof Strait, just south of Sand Point, and around Nikolsky, and then it jogs north into the Bering Sea again. 2,000-foot freezing line south of Haida Gwaii, but we do expect this to kind of jog northward on Sunday as that large area of low pressure is moving out of the Gulf. With that comes icing concerns generally above 4,000 feet along that thin and very slender area of moisture that's being stretched across the central and northern interior. You saw that on the flying weather chart a minute ago. Same problem here. That's going to keep isolated moderate threats across southwest all the way to just about Arctic Village and mostly over the open waters of the Gulf, again above 4,000 feet or so. The bigger issue is going to be the wind. As you look at the jet stream, you can see that fast-moving river of air really cruising across the North Pacific, 160 to 190 knots, and then a hard driving push northward into southeastern Alaska. And when you see these two streams splitting apart, that's a divergent flow, and that breeds more low pressure underneath it that allows that air to rise up. And so when you see us split in the jet stream that close together there, we know something else is going to happen underneath, especially in the north and eastern side of this low pressure system. So down below, sure enough, a lot of fast moving wind here, 60 to 90 knots across southeast, north and easterly winds wrapping around over Kodiak Island, 40 to 50 knots. Generally light winds across the interior, but still 15 to 30, and northerly winds coming down the west coast and really slowing down as they move into the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain. At 3,000 feet, wind speeds from 65 to 85 knots across southeast, 55 to 60 across the northern coast, including Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and south central, and light winds for the interior. So let's look at the turbulence, because we know we're going to have a rough day on Saturday in southeast. Below 4,000 feet, there is going to be widespread considerable moderate. That's a lock, but the question is going to be how much isolated severe do we see? And I would be very careful from Yakutat all the way down the outer coast to the Dixon entrance, and certainly along the inside passage anywhere near some of the rough terrain. There may be a little bit broader area of considerable moderate than we're showing here, but plan for some very bumpy weather as we go through your Saturday.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen, and actually collapse, we're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The Western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles in nests to respond to conservation measures. But threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected and the nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the US, we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For over 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
We're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there, and that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And some good news for the sea ice report today. Looks like most of the Chukchi Sea is at least marginally covered with ice, if not completely covered. Of course, this is not old ice we're talking about in the Chukchi Sea or into the Bering Strait now, but we do have more ice than we did this time last week, and the thicker concentrations are moving southward. We're seeing new ice forming around St. Lawrence Island, around Little Diomede, and inside Kotzebue Sound. Now we do see, you can barely pick it out here, just a little bit of a lead west of Utqiagvik heading toward Wainwright, mostly due to those easterly winds probably pulling the pack away from the coast. You'll also see some continued growth around the YK Delta as colder air is moving over colder water, and the winds are slowing down, which is just priming the situation for more ice growth as we head for the weekend. Check out the very latest anytime at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Now, a big storm's moving into the Gulf of Alaska, and as we talked about, winds are going to be a pretty big issue here coming into Saturday. Look at the areas along the outer coast. Wind speeds there reaching storm force 50 to 55, gusts to 70 knots south of Sitka from the east and southeast, 25 to 26-foot seas there. On the inside, northerlies in the Lynn Canal with 7-foot seas, 40-knot winds sustained, gusts to 50 inside Stevens Passage, 6-foot seas there, and a southeasterly wind coming up to 45 knots in Clarence Strait with a 9-foot sea. Remember, high wind warnings are in effect tomorrow for Craig and Klawock, and also for the Juneau and Douglas Island areas, mainly in the afternoon and into the evening. By Sunday, things should be subsiding, but we'll probably have some snow around Haines and Skagway. Again, a winter storm watch has been posted for your area. Winds subside somewhat across the outer coast, away from that storm force level, but certainly much stronger. And I should also mention that for Saturday, hurricane force wind warnings are posted down into western areas of Haida Gwaii, so keep that in mind if you're looking southward. Across southeast in the inside, 20 to 30 knot winds sustained, 4 to 13-foot seas there for Sunday, and the outer coast seas hold around 24 to 26-foot seas, so pretty rough stuff for both Saturday and Sunday. For Saturday across south central, you're looking at 35 to 40 knot winds from the east, anywhere from 22 to 23-foot seas, 4-foot seas on the inside of Prince William Sound. but a northeasterly wind strong at 25. Looks like north and northeasterly winds coming down Cook Inlet as strong as 35 knots outside of Kachemak Bay in the western Barrens. 12-foot seas there for Saturday. Winds diminish in all areas as we get into Sunday, but still blowing enough to get your attention. 20 to 30 in Cook Inlet with 5 to 7-foot seas. 7-foot seas inside of Prince William Sound on a 30-knot wind. And a southeasterly flow outside of Prince William Sound, north and northeasterlies across the North Gulf. 25 knots there with 17 to 18-foot seas. For Bristol Bay, northerlies at 30 knots with Saturday's weather in mind. 13-foot seas down the Alaska Peninsula coastline. Those strong winds wrap all the way past Kodiak Island, even reaching into Shelikof Strait a bit. 35 knots with a 12-foot sea and 22 to 27-foot seas there with gales going strong on Saturday. As we get into Sunday, some improvement. A north and northwesterly wind, 20 to 30 knots all areas. 5-foot seas in Shelikof as well as Bristol Bay, and down the coast 9-foot seas north of Cold Bay. A 14 to 20-foot sea there all the way from Sand Point up toward Kodiak Island and AKwx with that northwesterly wind. So still going. As we get into the Aleutians on Saturday, east and northeasterly winds, 9-foot seas on a 25-knot wind. You'll see a stronger north and northwesterly flow still holding on. 20 to 30-knot winds there from Nikolsky to Unalaska. Either side, you're looking at about 14 to 17-foot seas on Saturday. As we get into Sunday, the next storm is already taking shape and pulling in more stronger northerly winds across the central chain, 30 to 35 knots with 11 to 16-foot seas forming south of Nikolsky to Adak, and a north and northwesterly wind, 20 to 30 with seas coming up to about 11 to 15 feet as we get into Sunday afternoon. For the west coast, northerly is slowing down over Norton Sound, 5 knots there, 20 to 30 knots across the west coast with 5 to 8-foot seas. Watch for periods of heavy freezing spray in this region, especially around St. Lawrence Island. 15 to 25-knot winds on Sunday, 5 to 7-foot sea expected north of Nunivak Island to the south, 6 to 8-foot seas, and holding on to that 20 to 30 northerly wind around St. Paul all the way into the Kuskokwim Delta. Again, heavy freezing spray will be an issue, and that is possible there in the open waters north of St. Lawrence Island in through the Bering Strait for now. 15 to 20-knot winds. Light winds across the Beaufort, 5 to 10 as we get into Sunday. 10 to 15-knot wind comes up, 10 to 15 knots generally from the north and northeast, and then northerlies as we head into the Chukchi Sea and through the Bering Strait, 20 to 25 with 5-foot seas in the open waters. Here's a quick recap of the weather you should expect this weekend. A pretty large storm in the Gulf of Alaska, turbulence, poor visibility, snow and wind for southeast. Watches and warnings are posted for your area. Snow falling across south central into the eastern interior, and light snow and low clouds across the north slope and the west coast, with much colder weather coming in across the west coast as we go through your weekend. Have a good one. See you tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.